Dr. Elena Martinez knelt beside the strange crystal tower that rose from the red dirt of Kepler 442b. The structure was taller than any building she had ever seen. Reaching up into the purple sky like a needle made of frozen music, she pressed her gloved hand against its smooth surface and felt it vibrate under her touch. "This is impossible," she whispered into her helmet radio. "Jake, are you getting these readings?" Jake Collins looked up from his scanner 20 feet away. The communications specialists had been checking the area for any signs of technology, but his instruments were going crazy. "Doc, this thing is putting out more signals than a space station, but they're not like anything in our databases." Lisa Wang was taking pictures of symbols carved into the base of the tower. The cultural anthropologist had studied dozens of alien ruins, but these markings were different. They seemed to flow like water frozen in time. "Elena, you need to see this. These aren't just decorations. They're telling a story." Elena stood up and walked over to Lisa. The symbols wrapped around the entire base of the tower in a spiral pattern. Some looked like people dancing, others showed what might be cities or ships. But as the spiral went higher, the images became darker. The dancing figures turned into fighting ones. The cities looked broken. The ships were crashing. "What kind of story?" Elena asked. "I'm not sure yet," Lisa said. "But it doesn't look like it has a happy ending." The tower suddenly began to sing. Sound came from deep inside the crystal, starting low like the rumble of distant thunder. Then it rose higher, becoming a melody that was both beautiful and sad. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes, though she didn't know why. The music seemed to carry the weight of a million sorrows. Jake almost dropped his scanner. "Where is that coming from?" "The crystal itself," Elena said, running her hands along the surface again. "It's not just a monument. It's some kind of recording device." The music continued for several minutes, rising and falling like waves on a beach. Sometimes it sounded like a celebration, but mostly it sounded like a funeral song. When it finally stopped, the three humans stood in silence. "That was the most beautiful and terrible thing I've ever heard," Lisa said quietly. Elena nodded. She had been studying alien cultures for 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. The tower wasn't just telling the story with its carvings. It was singing the story too. And somehow, even though the language was completely unknown, she understood what it was trying to say. "They're all dead," she said. "Who?" Jake asked. "Whoever built this. The whole civilization. This isn't just a monument. It's a grave marker for an entire species." Lisa was still studying the carvings with her camera. "Elena, look at this section here. These figures, they look almost human. 2 arms, 2 legs, heads in the right place. But see these markings around. Their necks? I think those might be gills." Elena examined the images more closely. Lisa was right. The beings who had built this tower were humanoid, but they had lived in water as well as on land. Their cities in the carvings showed both underwater domes and surface structures connected by tubes. "An aquatic species," Elena said. "That explains the flowing nature of their art. Everything is designed to look like water movement." Jake was scanning the horizon with his binoculars. "Doc, I'm counting at least 12 more towers scattered across this continent. All of them are identical to this one." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alien planet's thin atmosphere. 12 towers, 12 grave markers. How many people died here? The crystal tower began to sing again, as if it had heard her question. This time the melody was different, softer, but somehow more desperate. It reminded Elena of a mother singing a lullaby to a child who would never wake up. "We need to get the full team down here," she said into her radio, calling the Terra Nova in orbit above them. "Captain Burke, we found something that changes everything. This isn't just an archaeological site. It's a warning." "Captain Ryan." Burke's voice crackled through the static. "A warning about what?" Elena looked at the tower, its crystal surface now glowing faintly in the setting sun of the alien world. The music continued to play, telling its story of rise and fall, of glory and tragedy, of a joke that had gone too far and cost everything. About what happens when a civilization destroys itself, she said. And I think they left instructions on how to avoid making the same mistake. Dr. Peter Hayes sat in the Terra Nova's main laboratory, his head in his hands. For 3 days, he had been trying to understand the alien music, and he was no closer to solving the puzzle than when he started. The computer screens around him showed wave patterns, frequency charts, and mathematical formulas, but none of it made sense. Still nothing? Rachel Foster asked as she entered the lab. The AI specialist carried a cup of coffee and looked as tired as Peter felt. The music is definitely a language, Peter said, rubbing his eyes. But it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. Most alien languages we found are based on symbols or sounds. This one is based on emotion. Rachel sat down next to him and looked at the data on the screens. What do you mean by emotion? Watch this, Peter said, pointing to a wave pattern on the main screen. This section of the music makes people feel sad. Every human who listens to it starts crying. But this other section makes them feel angry or afraid. The aliens weren't just telling a story with words. They were making people feel the story. Rachel leaned forward, interested. So it's not just communication, it's emotional manipulation. Not manipulation, Peter corrected. More like emotional truth. They found a way to make others experience exactly what they experience. When they felt joy, the music makes us feel joy. When they felt terror, we feel terror too. Rachel pulled up her own computer terminal and began running programs. If that's true, then maybe I can help. My AI systems are designed to recognize and analyze emotional patterns in human behavior. Let me see if I can apply the same techniques to this alien music. While Rachel worked, Peter continued studying the crystal recordings that Eleanor's team had brought back from the planet's surface. The Terra Nova now had samples from all 12 towers, and each one told a different part of the same story. I think I've got something, Rachel said after an hour of programming. Look at this. On her screen was a timeline that showed the emotional content of the alien music. The early sections were bright green, indicating happiness and prosperity. But as the timeline progressed, the colors shifted to yellow, then orange, then deep. Red, the beginning of their story, is full of joy, Rachel explained. They were celebrating something. A discovery, maybe, or a great achievement. But then something happened that changed everything. Peter studied the timeline more carefully. There's a specific moment where everything shifts. Right here, about 20% into the recording. What happens at that point? Rachel pulled up the audio file and played the section. The music started as a celebration, with multiple voices singing in harmony. But then a single voice broke away from the group, singing a different tune. Soon other voices joined the rebel song, and the harmony turned into discord. A disagreement, Peter said. Someone started singing a different song, and it split the group. But listen to what happens next, Rachel said, playing more of the recording. The discord grew worse. The two groups of voices began competing, each trying to sing louder than the other. The beautiful harmony that had started the piece was completely lost. Instead of music, it became noise, angry, violent noise. They had a conflict, Peter realized. A disagreement that tore their society apart, Rachel nodded. And if my analysis is correct, it wasn't about anything important. Look at this data. The original disagreement was small, maybe even silly, but pride kept both sides from backing down. Peter felt a chill as he understood what the aliens were trying to tell them. They started with something small. A joke, maybe, or a simple argument. But instead of laughing it off or finding a compromise, they let it grow. Into a war, Rachel finished. And not just any war. According to these emotional patterns, it was a war that consumed their entire civilization. Peter and Rachel spent the next several hours working together, combining linguistic analysis with emotional mapping. Slowly, the story of the alien civilization became clear. They called themselves a Harmonari, and they had once been a peaceful species that lived in perfect balance between land and sea. Their civilization had been built on cooperation and shared resources. For thousands of years, they had worked together to build great cities and explore the stars. They were artists and scientists, philosophers and engineers. They had created beauty that lasted for ages, but then came the small disagreement that changed everything. It was about trade routes, Peter said, reading the decoded message. Two groups of Harmonari merchants had a dispute over who had the right to use certain shipping lanes, something that could have been solved with a simple negotiation. But instead of talking, they started taking sides, Rachel added. Friends chose friends over facts. Families split apart over loyalty to different merchant groups. Before long, entire cities were taking sides in a dispute that had nothing to do with them. The music told the rest of the story in waves of growing sadness and anger. The trade dispute became an economic war. The economic war became a military conflict. The military conflict became genocide. They destroyed themselves over shipping lanes, Peter whispered. Rachel looked at the final sections of the alien timeline, where all the colors had turned black. And in the end, there was nobody left to use the shipping lanes at all. Peter saved their work and prepared a report for Captain Burke. The Harmonari had left their story as a warning, but he wondered if anyone would listen. After all, the aliens had probably thought their own people would never be foolish enough to destroy themselves over something so small. They had been wrong about that too. Captain Ryan Burke stared at the message on his command screen and felt his stomach drop. The transmission had come from Earth Command just an hour ago, and it contained the worst news he had received in his 20 years of space service. Sir, you need to see this, his communications officer said, handing him another data pad. We're getting reports from all across the solar system. The situation is getting worse by the hour. Ryan read the reports with growing alarm. 3 separate incidents in the asteroid belt had left over 200 miners dead. The Terran Federation blamed the Outer Rim Alliance for attacking their mining stations. The Alliance claimed the Federation had fired first. The Mars Collective said both groups were trying to steal resources that belonged to Mars. When did this start? Ryan asked. About 6 months ago, sir. But the violence only began last week. Ryan thought about Dr. Martinez and her team down on the planet's surface. They had discovered the story of an alien civilization that had destroyed itself over a trade dispute. Now humanity seemed to be following the same path. Get me a secure channel to Dr. Martinez, he ordered. A few minutes later, Elena's face appeared on the main screen. She was still on the planet, studying the crystal towers with her team. Her face was dirty and tired, but her eyes were bright with excitement. Captain, we've made incredible progress, she said. Peter and Rachel have decoded most of the Harmonari language. The story these towers tell is amazing and terrifying at the same time. Elena, I need to tell you something, Ryan interrupted. We just received word from Earth. Humanity is at war. Elena's expression changed instantly. The excitement vanished, replaced by shock and fear. What kind of war? Ryan explained the situation in the asteroid belt. As he spoke, he watched Elena's face grow pale. When he finished, she sat in silence. For a long moment. Captain, she finally said, this is exactly what happened to the Harmonari. They started fighting over trade routes and resource rights. Small disputes that should have been easy to resolve. What was the outcome for them? Total extinction, Elena said quietly. Every single member of their species died in the wars that followed. These towers are all that's left of a civilization that once spanned multiple star systems. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. How long did it take? According to the timeline Peter worked out, about 50 years from the first conflict to the final destruction. But the worst damage happened in the last 5 years. Ryan made a decision. Elena, I want you and your team back on the ship immediately. We're going to broadcast your findings to every human settlement in the solar system. Maybe if people understand what happened to the Harmonari, they'll think twice before letting this war continue. You think they'll listen? Elena asked. I hope so, because if they don't, we might be looking at the end of human civilization. 2 hours later, Elena and her team were back aboard the Terra Nova. They worked frantically to prepare a presentation that would explain the Harmonari story to the general public. Peter and Rachel put together audio samples of the alien music, while Lisa prepared visual displays showing the progression from peace to war to extinction. Elena practiced her speech in the ship's conference room. She knew she would have only one chance to make people understand the danger they were facing. The Harmonari were not so different from us, she began. They were intelligent, creative, and capable of both great beauty and terrible violence. They built amazing cities and created art that has survived for thousands of years. But they also had pride, stubbornness, and the inability to back down from a fight. Captain Burke watched from the doorway. Do you really think this will work? It has to work, Elena replied, because the alternative is too horrible to consider. The Terra Nova's communication array was powerful enough to reach every human outpost in the solar system simultaneously. When Elena was ready, Ryan gave the order to begin the broadcast. People of Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies, Elena began, looking directly into the camera. My name is Dr. Elena Martinez, and I have a story to tell you. It's the story of a civilization that destroyed itself over something that should have been easily resolved. It's a story that might be our own future if we don't learn from their mistakes. For the next 30 minutes, Elena told the complete story of the Harmonari. She played their music, showed their art, and explained how a simple trade dispute had escalated into galaxy-wide destruction. She described the towers that served as monuments to the dead and the warning they contained for any species that might find them. The Harmonari left us this message across thousands of years, Elena concluded. They want us to know that pride is not worth the price of extinction. That being right is not more important than being alive. That's sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong and ask for peace. When the broadcast ended, the Terra Nova fell silent. Everyone aboard waited to see if humanity would listen to the warning of the dead. Within hours, responses began coming in from across the solar system. Some people called Elena a fraud, claiming the whole thing was propaganda designed to benefit one side or another in the current conflict. Others dismissed the Harmonari story as ancient history that had nothing to do with modern humanity. But some people listened. And some people began to ask if the current war was really worth the risk of following the Harmonari path to extinction. Admiral Patricia Stone turned off the broadcast with an angry gesture. She had watched Dr. Martinez's presentation from her flagship, the Federation battleship Liberty, and she was not impressed. The war room around her buzzed with activity as officers prepared for the next phase of military operations. Ma'am, what are your orders regarding the alien broadcast? Asked Commander Davis, her chief of staff. It's obviously propaganda, Patricia said firmly. The Outer Rim Alliance probably paid those scientists to make up this story about dead aliens. They want us to feel guilty about defending our rightful claims to the asteroid mining zones. On the other side of the solar system, Colonel Marcus Webb was having a similar conversation aboard the Alliance command ship Freedom. He had also watched Elena's broadcast, and he had also dismissed it as enemy lies. The Federation thinks we're stupid, Marcus told his officers. They dig up some old alien ruins, and suddenly we're supposed to believe that fighting for our rights will destroy humanity. It's the oldest trick in the book. Make your enemy afraid to fight back. Director Amanda Cross sat in her office on Mars, reviewing the same broadcast for the third time. As the leader of the Mars Collective, she controlled the largest human population outside of Earth. Her decision about how to respond to the alien warning could influence millions of people. What do our scientists think about this discovery? She asked her advisor, Dr. Kevin Park. The archaeological evidence appears to be genuine, Kevin replied. But the interpretation could be wrong. Maybe these aliens destroyed themselves for completely different reasons than what Dr. Martinez suggests. Amanda nodded slowly. And even if the story is true, we're not aliens. We're humans. We can learn from our mistakes in ways they couldn't. Meanwhile, aboard the Terra Nova, Elena watched the responses to her broadcast with growing despair. Government. Leaders across the solar system were either ignoring her warning or actively rejecting it. Worse, the fighting in the asteroid belt was getting more intense. Captain, we're receiving distress signals from Ceres Station, Jake reported from his communications post. They're under attack by unknown ships. Ryan Burke felt his heart sink. Ceres Station was a civilian mining outpost with over 5,000 residents, including many families with children. It was supposed to be neutral territory, protected by treaties signed by all three major factions. Who's attacking them? Ryan asked. The distress signal doesn't say, Jake replied. But early reports suggest multiple attackers. This might be the first three-way battle of the war. Elena closed her eyes and listened to the emergency broadcast coming from Ceres Station. The voices were panicked, desperate. Children were crying in the background. She could hear explosions and the sound of breaking metal. They're not listening, she whispered. Just like the Harmonari didn't listen to their own wise voices. Rachel Foster was monitoring news feeds from across the solar system. It's getting worse, she reported. Both the Federation and the Alliance are blaming each other for the Ceres attack. Mars is mobilizing its fleet, claiming they need to protect civilian populations from both sides. Peter Hayes looked up from his analysis of the Harmonari music. There's something else in these recordings, he said. A section I missed before. It's not just about the war. It's about the people who tried to stop it. Elena hurried over to Peter's workstation. What do you mean? Listen to this section, Peter said, playing a part of the alien music that was different from the rest. Instead of the angry discord of war or the sadness of loss, this piece had a desperate, pleading quality. These are the voices of Harmonari who saw what was happening to their civilization, Peter explained. They tried to warn their people, just like you're trying to warn humanity. But nobody listened to them either. Elena felt a crushing weight of responsibility. The Harmonari had left their story as a warning, but now she was watching humanity ignore that warning, just as the aliens had ignored their own peacekeepers. There has to be something we can do, she said. Maybe there is, Rachel said, looking up from her computer. I've been analyzing the response patterns to your broadcasts. While the government leaders are rejecting the warning, ordinary people are starting to pay attention. Look at these social media trends. Rachel showed them charts tracking public opinion across human space. While official government responses were negative, civilian populations were beginning to question the war. Parents were asking why their children should die for mining rights. Workers were wondering if the economic benefits of war were worth the risks. The people are listening, Rachel said. Even if their leaders aren't, Elena felt a spark of hope. Then we need to reach more people. Not the politicians or military commanders, but ordinary citizens who have the power to demand peace. Ryan made a decision. Elena, I'm changing our mission. Instead of returning to Earth as ordered, we're going to visit every human settlement we can reach. We'll tell the Harmonari story to anyone who will listen. That's mutiny, Captain, Commander Davis warned over the CUN system. Earth Command has ordered us to return immediately. Then let them court-martial me, Ryan replied. I'd rather face a military tribunal than watch humanity destroy itself because we were too cowardly to keep trying. Elena looked at the faces of her team. Peter and Rachel both nodded their agreement. Lisa was already preparing additional presentation materials. Jake was calculating the best route to reach the maximum number of settlements. The Terra Nova becomes a messenger ship, Elena said. We'll carry the Harmonari warning to every corner of human space. Outside the ship's windows, the stars looked the same as always. But Elena knew that somewhere among those distant suns were the dead worlds of the Harmonari, their crystal towers still singing their songs of warning to anyone wise enough to listen. The question was whether humanity would prove wiser than the civilization that had come before them, or if they too would join the chorus of the dead, leaving their own warnings for species yet to be born. The war exploded across the solar system like a deadly flower blooming in space. Elena watched the news reports from the Terra Nova's observation deck, her heart breaking with each new story of destruction. What had started as mining disputes in the asteroid belt had grown into something much worse. Jupiter's moon Europa was burning. The Federation and Alliance fleets had met in battle near the ice-covered world, and the fighting had spread to the research stations on the surface. 3,000 scientists and their families were trapped in the underground cities, while warships fired weapons above their heads. The death toll is now over 50,000, Jake reported, his voice hollow with shock. And that's just from the battles we know about. There are probably more fights happening in deep space that haven't been reported yet. Elena turned away from the window. For 2 months, the Terra Nova had been traveling from settlement to settlement, sharing the Harmonari story with anyone who would listen. Some places welcomed them, others turned them away. But everywhere they went, the war followed close behind. Captain Burke to all senior staff, Ryan's voice came over the ship's communication system. Please report to the briefing room immediately. Elena gathered with the others around the conference table. Ryan looked older than he had when this journey started. The weight of watching humanity tear itself apart was showing on all their faces. I've just received word from the Titan research station, Ryan began. Dr. Martinez, they found another Harmonari site. Elena sat up straight. On Titan? Not on Titan itself, but on a small moon in the same system. The research team there says they discovered it 3 days ago, but they've been too busy evacuating civilians to study it properly. Peter leaned forward. What makes this site different? According to the preliminary reports, this tower is much larger than the others. And the music it plays is different too. Longer, more complex. Elena felt a mixture of excitement and dread. We need to get there immediately. I agree, Ryan said. But there's a problem. The Titan system is right in the middle of the current battle zone. All 3 fleets are fighting for control of Saturn's moons. Lisa looked at the star charts displayed on the briefing room screen. How bad is the fighting? Bad, Ryan replied. The Mars Collective launched a surprise attack on both Federation and Alliance positions 2 days ago. They're claiming that both sides were planning to attack Mars itself. Elena closed her eyes and listened to the Harmonari music playing softly in the background. Peter had started playing it during their briefings as a reminder of what they were trying to prevent. The alien songs of warning seemed more urgent now, more desperate. The fighting is escalating exactly like the Harmonari described, she said. First the trade disputes, then military conflicts, then surprise attacks based on fear and suspicion. Rachel was monitoring news feeds on her tablet. It's getting worse. Earth itself is starting to split apart. The African Union is supporting Mars. The European Federation is backing the Outer Rim Alliance. Asia is staying neutral, but for how long? And now they're using nuclear weapons, Jake added quietly. Elena's blood ran cold. Nuclear weapons? The Alliance used 3 nuclear missiles against Federation positions near Ganymede yesterday, Jake explained. They claim it was necessary to break through heavily defended positions. The Federation is promising nuclear retaliation. Elena stood up abruptly and began pacing around the room. This is exactly what happened to the Harmonari. Their music tells the same story. Conventional weapons, then chemical weapons, then nuclear weapons, then worse things we don't even have names for. What worse things? Ryan asked. Peter pulled up his analysis of the later Harmonari songs. According to the musical patterns, they eventually started using weapons that could destroy entire planets. They poisoned atmospheres, collapsed ecosystems, even found ways to make stars unstable. Stars? Lisa whispered. The final section of their music describes weapons that could cause solar flares powerful enough to burn away all life in a solar system. Peter continued. By the end, they weren't just fighting each other. They were fighting the universe itself. Elena stopped pacing and looked at her team. We have to get to that new Harmonari site. If it's larger and more complex than the others, it might contain information we haven't seen before. Maybe even solutions. Solutions to what? Ryan asked. To stopping this madness before it's too late. Ryan made his decision. Set course for the Titan system. We'll have to navigate through 3 different battle zones, but we don't have a choice. The journey to Titan took 4 days. Along the way, they passed the wreckage of dozens of ships from all 3 human factions. Some were still burning. Others were already cold and dark. Their crews, dead in the vacuum of space. Elena spent the journey studying the reports from the Titan research station. The new Harmonari Tower was 3 times larger than any they had found before, and its music was much more complex. But there was something else that caught her attention. This tower isn't just telling the story of the Harmonari War, she told Peter as they approached Saturn. According to these readings, it's also describing what happened after the war. After? Peter asked. But I thought they all died. Most of them did, Elena replied. But apparently, some survived long enough to learn from their mistakes. This tower might contain the story of how a few Harmori tried to rebuild their civilization. Did they succeed? Elena looked out at Saturn's rings, beautiful and peaceful in the distance, while human ships fought and died among the moons. We'll find out soon enough. But if they did find a way to stop the cycle of violence, then maybe there's still hope for humanity. The Terra Nova entered the Titan system just as a 3-way battle was ending near one of the smaller moons. The wreckage of over 100 ships floated in space, and the silence that followed the fighting was somehow worse than the noise of battle. Elena watched the debris field drift past their ship and wondered if humanity was already too far down, the same path that had destroyed the Harmonari. The music from the alien towers seemed to grow sadder as they flew deeper into the system, as if the dead aliens were mourning for another species about to join them in extinction. The massive Harmonari Tower on Titan's moon rose from the ice like a crystal mountain. Elena stood before it wearing her environmental suit, amazed by its size. This tower was not just larger than the others, it was different in every way. Where the other towers had been smooth and simple, this one was covered in complex patterns that seemed to move in the dim light. The music is different too, Peter said, holding his recording equipment near the base of the tower. It's not just one song, it's like a whole symphony with multiple movements. Rachel was running scans with her equipment. The energy readings are off the charts. This thing is putting out more power than a small city. Elena walked around the base of the tower, studying the carvings that covered its surface. Unlike the other sites, these images showed something new. The familiar story of the Harmonari War was there, but it continued beyond the destruction. There were images of survivors, small groups of aliens working together to rebuild. Lisa, look at this section, Elena called to the cultural anthropologist. These carvings show Harmonari who lived through the war. They're doing something to their own minds. Lisa examined the images carefully. It looks like some kind of medical procedure. They're inserting devices into their heads. But why would they do that to themselves? The tower began to sing before anyone could answer. But this music was unlike anything they had heard from the other sites. It started with the familiar sounds of celebration and joy, then moved through the discord of war and the sadness of loss. But then it continued into something new. The music became hopeful. Not the simple happiness of the beginning, but a deeper kind of hope born from suffering and wisdom. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks inside her helmet as the alien symphony told its complete story. Peter, are you recording this? She asked. Every note, Peter replied. But Elena, there's something strange about this music. It's not just telling us about emotions. It's actually changing how I feel. Elena noticed it too. As the music played, she could feel her anger about the human war fading away. Not disappearing, but transforming into something else. Understanding. Compassion. A deep desire to help rather than blame. The technology, she whispered. The devices the survivors put in their heads. They found a way to change how they experienced emotions. Rachel was studying her scanner readings with growing excitement. Elena, I think you're right. This tower isn't just playing music. It's broadcasting some kind of neural signal, a frequency that affects brain chemistry. Is it dangerous? Elena asked. I don't think so, Rachel replied, but it's definitely changing our brain activity, making us more empathetic, more able to see other perspectives. The music continued for another hour, telling the complete story of the Harmonari survivors. Elena and her team listened in amazement as they learned about the aliens, who had refused to give up hope even after their civilization was destroyed. They called themselves the Last Singers, Peter said, translating the musical language as it played. The few Harmonari who survived the wars decided that their species had one final chance to leave something good behind. What did they do? Lisa asked. They developed technology that could eliminate the brain patterns responsible for hatred and unreasonable anger. Peter continued. Not all anger, just the destructive kind that leads to violence. They kept the ability to feel justice and righteous indignation, but removed the urge to hurt others for personal gain or pride. Elena felt a chill of recognition. They found a way to fix the problem that destroyed their civilization. But it came too late for most of them, Rachel said, studying the energy patterns in her scanner. According to these readings, only a few hundred Harmonari were left when they developed this technology. The music reached its final movement, and Elena understood why this tower was so much larger than the others. It wasn't just a monument or a warning. It was a gift. They spent their final years building this tower, she realized. Not just to tell their story, but to share their solution with whoever found it. You mean the technology is here? Lisa asked. In this tower? Elena nodded slowly. The neural frequency technology. The ability to eliminate destructive hatred. From intelligent minds, they left it here for us to find. Peter was still translating the final sections of the alien music. They're giving us instructions. How to build the devices, how to use them safely, how to modify them for human brain. Chemistry. But there's a choice involved, Rachel added, reading the technical specifications displayed on her scanner. The technology doesn't force change on anyone. Each individual has to decide for themselves whether to use it. Elena looked at her. Team gathered around the massive crystal tower. In the distance, she could see the lights of human ships still fighting their pointless war. Nuclear weapons were being used daily now. Entire colonies had been wiped out. Earth itself was preparing for civil war. We have to get this information to everyone, she said. Every human in the solar system needs to know that there's another choice. But will they listen? Jake asked through the radio from the Terra Nova. The government leaders have ignored everything else we've tried to tell them. Elena touched the surface of the tower and felt it vibrate with alien music. The Harmonari had faced the same choice that humanity was facing now. They could continue fighting until everyone was dead, or they could choose to change themselves. Some will listen, she said. The ones who are tired of fighting. The ones who have lost family members to this war. The ones who want their children to grow up in a peaceful world. And the ones who don't want to change. Peter asked Elena looked up at the crystal tower reaching toward the stars. Then they'll have to live with the consequences of their choice. But at least we'll have given everyone the option to choose peace over pride. The alien music was ending now, fading away into the silence of space. But Elena knew the real symphony was just beginning. Humanity would have to decide whether to follow the Harmonari path to extinction, or to choose the more difficult road of changing themselves. The last singers had done everything they could to help. Now it was up to the living to decide whether their gift would be accepted or rejected. Elena began preparing for the most important broadcast of her life, the one that would offer humanity a chance to end the war not through victory or defeat, but through transformation. Elena sat in the Terra Nova's communication center, staring at the script she had written for what might be humanity's final broadcast. Outside the ship's windows, 3 fleets of human warships were preparing for the largest battle in human history. The war had reached Earth itself, and billions of lives hung in the balance. "Are you ready, Dr. Martinez?" Jake asked, his hand hovering over the transmission controls. Elena took a deep breath. She had spent 3 days preparing this message, knowing it might be the last chance to prevent humanity from following the Harmonari into extinction. The alien technology was real, tested, and ready to share. But would anyone listen? "Begin transmission," she said. Elena looked directly into the camera as her image was broadcast simultaneously to every human device in the solar system. On Earth, people stopped in the middle of evacuation procedures to watch. On Mars, soldiers preparing for battle paused to listen. Throughout the asteroid belt and outer colonies, humans who had been fighting each other for months gathered around screens. "My name is Dr. Elena Martinez," she began. "6 months ago, I told you the story of the Harmonari, an alien civilization that destroyed itself over a simple trade dispute. Today, I'm here to tell you how their story ends and to offer you a choice that could save our species." Elena explained the discovery of the final Harmonari Tower, the technology the alien survivors had developed, and the gift they had left behind. She kept her words simple and clear, knowing that panic and fear were making it hard for people to think clearly. The Harmonari survivors found a way to remove destructive hatred from their minds while keeping all their other emotions intact, she continued. Love, joy, righteous anger at injustice, the desire to protect family and friends. All of that remains. But the urge to hurt others for personal gain, pride, or petty differences disappears. She paused to let that sink in. Across human space, people were arguing about what Elena had said. Some called it impossible. Others called it dangerous. But many were listening with desperate hope. "I know what you're thinking," Elena said. "You're wondering if this technology is safe, if it will change who you are, if it's right to alter human nature. These are good questions, and I don't have easy answers. What I can tell you is that we've tested it, and it works exactly as the Harmonari described." Captain Burke appeared on screen beside Elena. "The choice is yours," he said. "No government, no military, no corporation can force this technology on anyone. The Harmonari made sure of that. Each person must decide for themselves." Elena nodded. "We're broadcasting the complete technical specifications to every human settlement. Any doctor or scientist can build the devices using common medical equipment. The choice belongs to every individual human being." The transmission ended, and Elena waited. For the first hour, nothing happened. The battle fleets continued their preparations. Government leaders issued statements calling the technology dangerous and untested. Military commanders ordered their troops to ignore the broadcast dot, but then something unexpected began to happen. On a Federation battleship near Earth, Dr. Linda Foster, a ship's doctor, built the first human version of the Harmonari device. She tested it on herself first, then offered it to other crew members who volunteered. Within hours, something remarkable occurred. The volunteers stopped caring about the war. Not because they became passive or weak, but because they could no longer understand why they had been so angry about mining rights and political boundaries. They still wanted to protect their families and defend justice, but the hatred that had been driving the conflict simply vanished. Word spread quickly through unofficial channels. Soldiers, doctors, engineers, and ordinary citizens began building and using the devices. Not everyone chose to use them, but many did. And those who did began refusing to fight. Commander Alex Thompson of the Federation, Captain Nia Rodriguez of the Outer Rim Alliance, and engineer Ben Carter from Mars were among the first military leaders to use the technology. When they spoke to each other after the treatment, they found they could barely remember why their factions had been fighting. "We were going to destroy ourselves over asteroid mining rights," Alex said during a three-way video call between the fleet commanders. "How did we get so angry about something so small?" "Pride," Nina replied. "Stupid, destructive pride. The same thing that killed the Harmonari." Ben was looking at reports from across his fleet. "Half my crews have used the alien technology. The other half are confused about why their shipmates don't want to fight anymore. The ceasefire didn't come from government orders or military commands. It came from ordinary people who simply stopped participating in the war. Soldiers refused to fire weapons. Ship crews declined to attack other vessels. Workers refused to build more war machines. The war ended not with a great battle or peace treaty, but with exhaustion and bewilderment. Those who had used the Harmonari technology couldn't understand why they had ever wanted to hurt other humans. Those who hadn't used it found themselves fighting an enemy that wouldn't fight back. Within weeks, the three major factions began serious peace negotiations. The talks were led by people who had used the alien technology, and they focused on practical solutions rather than blame and punishment. The asteroid mining rights that had started the war were shared equally among all human settlements. Elena returned to the original Harmonari site where her journey had begun. The crystal towers still sang their songs of warning and hope, but now they sounded different to her ears. Less like a funeral dirge and more like a lullaby. She had used the alien technology herself, and the change was profound. She still felt all her emotions, still cared deeply about her work and her friends. But the anger and resentment that had been building inside her during the war had simply vanished. She felt free in a way she had never experienced before. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Peter asked, joining her beside the tower. He had also chosen to use the technology, as had most of the Terra Nova crew. Elena listened to the Harmonari, music drifting across the alien landscape. "I think we made the only choice that mattered. We chose to learn from the past instead of repeating it. Not every human had chosen to use the alien technology. Perhaps half the species had decided to remain unchanged, and that was their right. But it was enough. The war was over, and humanity had survived its first great test of wisdom. The Harmonari Towers continued their eternal song, but now they sang to a species that had listened and learned. The last singers could finally rest, knowing their gift had not been given in vain. Humanity had broken the cycle. The joke that had started in anger had ended in wisdom, and the future stretched ahead full of possibilities that had seemed impossible just months before. The symphony of destruction had become a song of hope.